Bang! Neeves knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife Kara's playing a video game. And today we are talking about top 10 pet peeves of mine. Now, about a year ago, there was a tag video that was going around, top 3 pet peeves. But I decided to redo it with my top 10 pet peeves. I am going to be doing a bunch of top 10 videos this week to help fill in my top 10 playlist. And also, I've been doing this for quite some time, so I have a bunch of top 10 videos. And I don't try to do top 10 too often, but every once in a while it's nice. So this week I'm going to be doing a bunch of them. And I have a whole bunch of cool video ideas. You know, some of them are goofy, some of them are serious. But first up, number 1, detent lash. Now, I'm going to put 2 in number 1, the category, and also just saying bad detents altogether. At this day and age, a knife should have a good detent. There's $10 knives, $20 knives that have amazing detents. There's no reason why a knife can't have a good detent. Now, I know they make assisted knives, and I know some people like assisted knives, so, you know, that's cool, but they don't need it because you can get a good detent out of the same price of knife, or cheaper even sometimes. But detent lash is another thing. When the detent ball isn't seating into the detent hole properly, and it's leaving, there's a little bit of room in the detent hole, and it makes it where it rattles around in there. I can't stand that. Drives me absolutely nuts. And also it makes it to where when you go to push the flipper tab, it has play. See my blade moving? So I don't like that. Next is FRN. Why are we still using this stuff? I don't know why. Because G10 is basically the same price, but it looks so much better. Let me find a different color that's not really coming up too good. Oh yeah, you know what? Here, I'm just going to pull up a whole bunch of FRN really quick. Now, if you're gonna use FRN, I think at least put not a pattern, but a texture on it that makes it where it feels better quality. Because when you get this like this, it just looks like plastic. It looks so cheap. And then even like this to me is so cheap looking. I don't like it. I don't like it. Especially when for the same price you can get G10. And G10 is so much better quality. It feels so much better. It's stronger. And you can, I know it's a lot, it's very cheap. There's knives for $20 and under that use quality G10. Quality G10. But then you'll see companies that give you a more expensive knife with FRN. You know, I mean, heck, there's even cheap G10 out there you could be using instead of that. All right, next up, any steel under 8CR. Now, I understand some people but there's budget knives out there that are 8CR, and 8CR isn't a bad steel. In all reality, 8CR is a pretty good steel, especially for the $20, $30 range. And even under that, because actually technically like the $10 knife should be an 8CR. A $15 knife should be at least an 8CR. There's knives at $15 that use 440C, and 440C is a damn good steel. 8CR is almost at the end of the line. But 8CR is really not that bad of a steel, but we shouldn't be using just plain old stainless or 5CR, 3CR, 7CR. At the very least, use 8CR. Especially if you have 8CR with good fit and finish and good grinds, then why not? And for a good price, I'm saying. Like, so, you know. But, yeah. Next up, T6s. Why do we still accept T6s, especially on knives that are expensive. Now, I can go a step further and say poor hardware. Just hardware, period. Cheap hardware. Because when you use cheap hardware and T6s at the same time, it makes it where taking apart your knife is ridiculous. And they strip out so much easier. Now, quality hardware. Sorry, there we go. Quality hardware, it's not that big of a deal. But there's times where I'll go to take apart a knife and I'll have the right size bit and it has play, inside the bit hole, and they strip out their soft steel. So at least have quality hardware, but just use T8s. Quality T8 hardware, it's not hard to come by. Lots of knives are using it. Lots of knives, even tiny knives, have big hardware. I know this is an expensive knife, but still though, the screws weren't that expensive, especially when they're steel. Okay, next up, Loctite. Now, Loctite you need Loctite, right? Lots of knives just need it. You got to have some good some Loctite, but you don't need a lot of it. And you don't need red Loctite. Use the blue stuff. Lots of companies right now, or not lots, but some companies like to throw in some red Loctite in their pivots or on their hardware, and then you go to try to take it apart, and you gotta try every trick in the book. You gotta heat it up. You gotta put pressure on it. You gotta strip your screws out. You know, it's ridiculous. Just use a little tiny bit of blue Loctite. Now, if that knife is coming apart, like say if I have a knife, right, and I keep flicking it, and I've put blue Loctite in it. Now, if you use, let me just say this really quick. If you use Loctite, let it sit for 48 hours. So, take your screw out, put your little tiny dab of blue Loctite on there, put it back in, make sure your centering's nice and good, flip it, till you got your action, make sure you got your action where you want, no blade play, then fold it up and let it sit for 48 hours, because the Loctite needs to dry, and it takes 36 to 48 hours. Do that, and if you did that, and it's still coming out, then that knife shouldn't have left the factory, in my opinion. Like, if they need red Loctite to stop the pivot from unscrewing itself, then something's going on. Now, there are some knives you'd say, like, well, that means it has really good fit and finish. Yeah, there's a point of good fit and finish, and then the fit is just too tight. So, but, like, if that happens without Loctite, that's not a big deal. That's a normal thing. That's a normal knife with good fit and finish if it's happening, and it just doesn't have Loctite. Okay, next thing, bad clips. Oh my God, do I hate bad clips. I can't carry it. I can't carry it. Look at that. That thing will fall right out of my pocket. Now, this is one thing because it's heavy, but then because you can use it. You can put it in and out of your pocket. It's just not tight. Now then you got all the way down to this, where they don't give you no room under the clip, and there's no ramp. This thing has a ramp, but it's pushed down inside there. Like, it's so hard to use. And then look at that, when it bent, like, my pants are like this thick. It can't even fit under there. I mean, that's a normal fit for a clip is like this. Look at all that room. That's normal. Look at how much room was under that clip. Nothing. Clips these days, come on. Come on. I mean, we all wear pants, so it shouldn't be that hard to make a good clip. They should be able to put it in and out of their pocket and know whether or not it's working good or not. Next thing, a lock bar that's moved over entirely way too fast. A lock bar that is at 100% and it's hardly used. Now, I've seen this a bunch of times, even on quality knives, where, like, if you keep flicking it and playing with it, the lock bar goes over 100%. And now some lock bars settle in about right there. Now that sometimes worries me. Now if I turn it over and I look at the lock face and I see there's a nice good angle on it, it's not that worrisome to me. But when there's not, I know, like, I better not fidget with that knife, because if I do, it's going to get to 100% lockup pretty quick from fidgeting. So yeah, I don't like seeing that. I like seeing the lock bar in a nice, good, early place. Now you see the angle after the lock bar, where the lock bar is about to move to, going that way. See that little angle? That's a nice, good pitch. This knife can last a long, long time. The knife will probably last longer than the steel will before it's sharpened out. Next thing, sharpening choils. Now, there's lots of different versions of this, you know, because like you could say like, oh, well, Spyderco doesn't even have a sharpening choil. Well, you can put one in. That's not quite what I'm talking about, because you can just run your stone flat right here. What I'm talking about is like this. When they put the damn plunge grind past where the edge goes, this hole right here, this where they put this, you know, divot, the sharpening choil right here, they should have moved it up to here. So this whole gap right here should be up to here, and they didn't. They ran the edge right into the plunge grind. And when you're trying to show off your edge, it just sucks when you got to do that. Now, what I could do is just cut in my own sharpening choil. Right? I could just do that, but I shouldn't have to, especially for the price of, you know, a quality knife. They should just do it for me so that I can keep sharpening it and not have to worry about it. Now, eventually, yeah, after I've used it a ton, yeah, I might have to cut in a sharpening choil, but not for the first 10 sharpenings or whatever. I should be able to get 10 sharpenings out of an expensive knife. Come on. Now, I understand, like, it's not that big of a deal if it's just a work knife and you're just beating the heck out of it. And you're just, you know, beating it, sharpening it, and then, you know, cutting stuff and destroying your edge, sharpening it. It's not that big of a deal. But now, if it's something where you want to be proud of it and keep it for a long time, you know, like an EDC knife that's, you know, that's expensive or of good quality, you want to be able to have a nice, good-looking edge on it. Next thing, the access to the lock bar. I cannot stand when the lock bar has no access. Then you gotta push your finger in real hard in there and move it this way, like, oh, back up, see? And then you got a problem with that too. Now, or you gotta like wedge your finger sideways in there, get it in there, and then it hits the damn detent ball. I can't stand that. I want nice, easy access to the lock bar. I want to see the lock bar. Nice, easy access, no problems. Don't have to worry about the detent because it just goes right past. I hate seeing bad access to the lock bar. Nice, easy access. Yeah. This knife it was like that, like I thought it was like that, but it's not as bad as I thought at first. But you do kind of have to smush your finger in there a little bit. It could be better, but it's not as bad as some. So I kind of got used to it. Just like all knives, you do get used to it, but at some point you shouldn't have to get used to it. You have to unlock your knife. Give us access to the lock bar. It's pretty simple. I mean, just cut in a groove here. Give us access to the lock bar. It'd make life so much easier. Next thing, which is the last thing, but I got 2-in-1. You guys know how I like the 2-in-1s. Bad grinds. I hate when I see a grind on one side that's different on the other side. Or like, so when you're sharpening, like say if I sharpen it at 17 degrees and then I sharpen this side at 17 degrees and one side of my my apex is way bigger than the other side, because this side they grinded it thicker than this side. Or when, like, say the sharpening choil is off on one side like this, but but then on, and they got it good on this side. So this plunge grind was done good. Now this side, it was done bad. So like stuff like that, you know, where the grind is just off, and if you even look like some of these spots are off just a little bit. Now, when it's done by hand, you kind of forgive it a little more than when a machine does it. Now, I know they have jigs where, and what a jig is where, like, say if I'm gonna grind this knife, they have a thing where it's basically like a fixed system to where I can do it by hand. I make a jig where both sides will be the same. Now, some people just go and they do it by hand. They don't use a jig at all. Now, if you do it like that, that's a little bit more forgivable. You kind of understand why. You're human and you're using a belt and you're doing it freehand and you're eyeballing it. So I'm doing this side and then looking at it. Now, that's a lot more difficult. Now, when you have just a production knife that you know a damn machine did it, a robot did it, then that's, you know, that is upsetting. You know, like you want to see your grinds nice and even. Okay, and the last one, or which is the same thing, bad blade geometry. Now, what I'm talking about here is when you have a knife that, and I'm not talking about thick behind the edge. That's not what I'm talking about. There's lots of knives that are thick behind the edge that still have great blade geometry. What I'm talking about is bad blade geometry, where the spine thickness and then the drop down to the edge, it just rapidly drops down, where it doesn't give it enough room to drop down, and it doesn't taper slowly. It, like this one right here, it's super thick behind the edge, but then also the spine is extremely thick. Like, look at this next to the buck marksman. Look how thick that is. But then look how tall the grind is. Now, that's a flat ground blade. This is a hollow, and it's taller. This literally is like an axe, and it's small. Now, there's some knives that are way worse than this, and this one's really bad. So, like, stuff like that, just bad blade geometry, where they don't give you enough room to drop down to a fine edge. And it doesn't necessarily have to be thick or thin behind the edge. It can be thick behind the edge and still have good blade geometry. You know, like the Spyderco Shaman, that's thick behind the edge but has good blade geometry. But when they're not leaving you enough room and it's basically just a swedge like an axe, that's when, you know, that's a little ridiculous. So there you guys go. I love you guys. Peace.